How Ukraine lost Snake Island. On the ongoing Ukraine-Russia conflict, new landmarks are gained and lost on both sides frequently, but one particular area that has occupied center stage for quite some time is Snake Island. Today, we'll talk about Ukraine and how it lost Snake Island. If you like what we say, check out our other videos and subscribe to our channel, Military Future, for more such content. Now let's take a closer look at what went down between Russia and Ukraine at Snake Island. Snake Island wasn't in mainstream discussions until an ultra-nationalist named Alexander Dugin stressed its historical power of influence. He meant to say that historically, whoever won Snake Island won the war. Although this sounds quite philosophical, the real point of the potential for the island was that Russia could use it as a blocking point for Ukrainian ships, as almost every important trade route passed near that island. Snake Island was a barren, relatively useless rock mass covering only 0.2 kilometers. Its significance didn't lie in its resources but in its strategic location. This place had always served as an instrument to control the surrounding Black Sea waters, which contained large deposits of oil and gas. Due to this reason, every surrounding nation tried to gain control over it, but in the 2000s, Romania proposed its declaration as a rock, stating it to be too small to own. The next chapter in the history of Snake Island was expected to unfold in 2014. Russia took Crimea and the island was located within 300 kilometers of it. This made Snake Island both an asset and a liability for Ukraine. It was a key location for monitoring Russian activity through air defense and radar systems, and also for grain exports from Ukraine. The cause of concern was a possible attack by Russia. The situation was delicate as two of the Ukrainians' most important ports, Odessa and Kherson, needed the waters around this island as part of their export routes. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky cleared Ukraine's stand on it by declaring it as part of Ukraine's sovereign territory. On the 23rd of February 2022, Ukraine's concerns came to life. Fighter jets from Crimea attacked Snake Island, which had less than 100 people defending it. The constant strikes and a lack of defense made it an easy kill for Russia, and Ukraine lost Snake Island within hours. The next day, Putin announced Russia's full-blown military operation to reclaim Ukraine's cities, and shortly after, these cities were met with airstrikes from everywhere. Russia didn't forget the border and set in tanks, trucks, and helicopters to leave no grounds for retaliation by Ukraine. Sadly for Ukrainians, there was more to come. Russia's Black Sea flagship cruiser, the Moskva, soon arrived near Snake Island to answer any counterattacks from the other side. Russian ships gave warnings to surrender and threatened bomb attacks if the Ukrainians persisted. What followed was the most iconic trash talking in modern times, but ultimately Ukraine surrendered. The trash talk sparked a meme fest online, and the officers responsible for that were hailed as heroes. There were also reports of some nooses being tied around those trying to oppose Russia at Snake Island and probable executions, but that information is unclear. Overall, it was an easy win for Russia. In the upcoming days, Russia strengthened control over Snake Island by installing advanced weaponry and defense systems to resist any counterattacks. It had Moskva nearby, and the giant was responsible for safeguarding the waters and Russian ships around Snake Island. Moskva was loaded with a missile system that was ready to strike at any time. It was a fully packed missile system and not just another patrol ship. It was arguably overkilling on Russia's part. Nevertheless, these moves slowly handed Russia control over the northwestern sea. But for Ukraine, it was expected to derail supply lines and crash the nation's economy very soon. It also wrecked the global grain market, as Ukraine was a major global exporter. After capturing Snake Island, the next target on Russia's list was assumed to be the port of Odessa. After all, it was an important moneymaker for Ukraine and a vital control point for Russia. The Ukrainian navy was severely weakened, so the last resort was to deplete the underwater oil deposits around Odessa. Much to Ukraine's surprise, Russia never attacked. But the restfulness didn't last when reports of Russia wanting to install advanced, long-ranged air defense systems on Snake Island started surfacing. If done, this would have given Russia complete control of the southern Ukraine's air zones. On 24th of March, Ukraine blew up Orsk, a relatively similar, small Russian ship. This was an embarrassing jab to the Russian Navy, but Moskva was still standing strong. Ukraine decided to use TB2, fighter drones designed by Turkey that weren't the most advanced weaponry but were highly functional. On April 13, 2022, Ukraine attacked Moskva and completely shattered it. This was when the morale of the ever-so-mighty Russia came plummeting down. The loss of Moskva was one of the biggest the Russian Navy had seen since World War II. This called for a change in Russia's naval approach. On May 2nd, Ukraine smashed twin Raptor-class boats near Snake Island, giving a setback for Russia, but apparently Russia considered this another fluke and did nothing. Do you think this was a fluke or a result of concerted efforts? Tell us in the comments if you think Russia was right, and tell us your favourite strategy used by Ukraine, and also hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Now, back to the video. On May 6th, TB2 drones struck again, this time eliminating any air defense systems that Russia had on Snake Island. Russia was surely humbled when Ukraine hit this milestone and was the most vulnerable it had been in a long time. The next goal for Ukraine was to prevent Russia from re-establishing air systems on the island. Drones kept a close eye on the shores and even blew up an SA-15 on May 7th, blocking the only unloading mark Russia had there. Ukraine did everything in its might to cause damage to Russian materials and plant terror in their hearts. Assault boats, fighter jets, and just about any source of shelter on the island were completely destroyed by the drones, leaving Russia in a wounded state. In one instance, a Russian helicopter carrying troops and materials was just about to land when Ukraine blew it up into smithereens. Russia progressed each day slowly, but ultimately could unblock the unloading point and regain ammunition at Snake Island. This ended Ukraine's happy days, but didn't start happy ones for Russia. Russia had lost more equipment and material and gained close to nothing at this juncture. But there was still no intention of retreating till early June. The reason why Russia was latching onto this piece of rock is still unclear. Back in Moscow, experts on every media channel were pushing Putin's idea of gaining control over Snake Island, even though they had no factual evidence to support their claims. Around the same time, Denmark signed an agreement with Ukraine to supply Harpoon missiles, which had a longer range than the Turkish drones. The order arrived in mid-June, and on the 17th, the Russian Navy vessel Vasily Bek was decimated by Ukraine. Russia finally realized that trying to keep Snake Island was a disastrous idea, especially when Ukraine had Harpoon missiles ready to strike whichever supply ships arrived near the island. In June's end, Russia abandoned Snake Island completely, leaving a torn island behind. There was finally silence near the shores of the island, with no jets, bombs, or missiles shooting across the skies. Russian warships were patrolling nearby waters even now, but they lacked air defense systems to cause any significant damage. Ukraine wisely decided against rearming the island. It was realized from the Russian example that whoever tries to settle on that chunk of rock will eventually turn to dust. But this alone was not enough. They needed to send a victory message to the world, especially Putin. That's how the Re-Raise Flag mission came into being. It was undeniably difficult to pull off. The Special Navy Force Spetsnaz was assigned to this task. They moved in stealth in underwater ships at night to avoid getting struck by the Russian missiles. In a series of efforts on July 7th, the Spetsnaz succeeded in their mission. The photograph was widely circulated to celebrate Ukraine's victory, even when it was a partial one. The Russian media, however, reported the abandonment of its garrison from the island as a gesture of goodwill and not a defeat to lament over. The stretched-out Battle of Snake Island did not end well for Russia. Not only did it lose nearly $1 billion, but it also lost its soldiers and wounded many others in the process. In the Ukrainian example, the recreation of the classic story of the underdog winning the race was seen. This occurred mostly due to a lack of planning and preparations from Russia. If you liked our discussion of the Battle of Snake Island, then share this video and also do check out other videos too. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one.